It's tough for me to explain why I'm so excited about this gun. At its core, it's just a blowback operated 9mm semi-auto large format AR pistol with a brace, and there are dozens if not hundreds of those on the market. And it really comes down to the gun's aesthetic, because it looks like a gun and it represents a gun I've wanted for about 2 decades now. When I was 15, I stumbled across this Jane's Gun Recognition Guide, and it cataloged a ton of guns, including the Colt submachine gun family. And inside of the Colt submachine gun family sits the Model 633, aka the Colt Department of Energy submachine gun. To me, that gun was the coolest and remains the coolest gun I've ever seen. I really don't know why, but something about the unique look of it kind of captured my imagination. And the story too. It has a great story, and the rarity, I guess not being able to own one, all of that kind of just made me really want one. And over the years, clones have come and gone, and I've never been at a point where I could spend $3,000 for a 9mm blowback operated AR pistol. But that's changed. I still wouldn't pay that much, but I don't have to because PSA owns H&R, and H&R is producing the H&R DOE submachine gun. Now, obviously, it's not a real submachine gun. It's just a semi-auto large format AR pistol. But the point stands. It's a awesome clone of a gun I've wanted for 2 decades. So I think I could be a little bit excited about it. Now, the history of the Colt DOE SMG, or the Model 633, is tied to the history of the Colt submachine gun, which I'll try to tell in fast forward. So Colt ruled when it came to rifles and carbines, but they wanted some of that submachine gun money. HK was kind of eating that lunch with the MP5, and it's important to remember that in the 1980s, law enforcement and tactical teams was really all about the submachine gun. So with that in mind, Colt decided to develop their own, and they wisely modeled it after the AR-15 or the CAR-15 of the era. Now their main competition was the expensive and German MP5. And while that was a great gun for the era, I do think Colt had a more ergonomic platform with the AR-15, and turning it into a direct blowback 9mm submachine gun was likely the more economical option. So the original was the Colt 635 SMG, which H&R also has recreated, and I also have a review of that on my channel, so please check it out. Now the Department of Energy submachine gun, officially called the Model 633, was their more compact option. It aimed to compete with the MP5, but it was kind of a silly competition because the MP5K was much smaller, and the 633 was a fair bit bigger due to the need for a receiver extension and that external buffer system the AR-15 uses. Now the 633 is also known as the briefcase gun among Colt employees, but it's most famously just known as the DOE SMG. That's because it was developed for the Department of Energy, who was responsible for, protecting the nuclear assets of all types. This was reportedly a fairly small order, and PSA has likely already produced more of the H&R DOE SMG than Colt ever did. It's also important to realize that the Department of Energy was already using the M16 and the Colt Commando, as well as what was likely semi-auto variants of the AR-15. So the exact role the gun served isn't really well known, or isn't known at all. If I had to guess, the Colt DOE SMG was probably used for transportation and for use when riding in vehicles. The Department of Energy no longer transports nuclear materials via train or plane, so they do it over highways. So they're in and out of these giant trucks all the time, and I'm guessing that's what the DOE SMG was used for. Due to its small size, it's really easy to use in and out of vehicles. We really don't know what the DOE SMG was used for. It's just a guess if it was used in vehicles. I can't find a photo of the gun in use with any of the protective force from the DOE, but I can find plenty of them using the MP5, so I'm not really sure why this gun exists, but I'm glad it does. With that said, there has been a hole in the retro AR market for the various Colt submachine guns, and H&R is filling it with some really high quality clones, and the DOE SMG is by far my favorite. So the features of this gun are kind of related to the fact that it's a clone of an older gun. This isn't a super modern gun with all these cool features, and it's not a gun I'd use for home defense or duty use. While you could do that, there are better options in the market. It's also not a 100% clone of the original Colt DOE SMG. Some changes were made to make it a little more economical and probably a little more user-friendly overall. So with that in mind, we'll go front to rear, we'll talk about its features, and point out some of the things that are not clone correct. So up front, the barrel is threaded and suppressor ready. This was not a feature on the original Colt DOE guns, and it's likely just kind of integrated to satisfy the modern market that loves suppressing guns. Plus, 9mm are really easy to suppress, and this would be very fun to suppress. From there, we have the integrated hand shield Colt developed to keep your hand from drifting in front of the barrel. Up top, we have a folding sight, which might be the first AR folding sight ever developed. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. There is no like active locking device on this sight. You can just press it down. You just have to overcome a detent and a little bit of spring pressure, it seems like. With that said, it's not like it's flopping all around. It does take some force to push down. Now, why the sight folds, no one really knows. There's some speculation that it was used for firing ports, but that's just speculation. Maybe it was to create a more snag-free design when stored, but ultimately the reasoning's been lost to time. So the original Colt DOE guns used modified M231 port firing weapon handguards, and that's cloned here with a polymer handguard that looks and feels and even smells like that Colt plastic generations of servicemen have wielded with the M16 and M16A2. Up top we have what's essentially an A1 upper with simple A1 sights, including 2 apertures that were clearly made for the M16 and for long-range rifle use. I do wish they were a little wider, but that would make the gun less clone correct. Now the original real Colt DOE guns used 5.56 lowers with a pinned magazine block to use the 9mm magazine. That's not the case here. These are machined to take Colt submachine gun magazines without a block. This is a much more reliable option. You're not worried about like roll pins holding in a block to make sure your gun works. It's also probably cheaper to do it this way than to try to come up with a block. I think ProMag has one if you really want to go that route, but you're also using a ProMag. From there we get the A2 grip, which in the mid 80s was clone correct. And the receiver markings are fairly good. They do have like H&R instead of Colt. They do mark it as a 635 and not a 633. They do have an auto engraving, but obviously we're limited to semi-auto fire. And then when we get to the end of the gun, we have the HAR-15 brace, the HAR-15 brace, which I really like. So it's a blade-style brace that attempts to replicate the look of the original CAR-15 stock, but obviously it's just a brace. It does have several sling points, including this little QD slot at the end if you want to sling it. So this is a blade-style brace, which, it lives up to its name when we start shooting. So I won't lie to you, I do have a bias towards this gun just because I've wanted it for 20 years. And shooting the H&R DOE SMG was everything I wanted it to be and everything I expected it to be. The first thing I did was just check the sights, see if I needed to adjust them. And I haven't adjusted M16 style sights in a very long time, and that streak will continue because it seems like they were dead on and zeroed out of the box. First thing I did was just aim at a 4-inch piece of steel and shoot, and I heard the ding. Steel's fine, but 4 inches is pretty big when it comes to accuracy, so I did a paper accuracy test, and I fired a 5-round group that was less than an inch wide at 25 yards in a standing position. Rounds seemingly smashed into the same small hole repeatedly, and it was ultimately a very fantastic feeling, and it was nice that I didn't have to adjust M16 sights because I don't really remember how, and I'd never done it for a 9mm. Well, I could have figured it out. I'm glad I didn't have to. To keep the accuracy testing up, I went back to 50 yards and I fired on some steel gongs ranging from like a 33% reduced size IPSC target to a 6-inch gong. And I could easily clean them up. It was all dings. I mean, I couldn't really see them because the front sight post kind of covers the entire thing up. But if I had an idea of where it was, I could hit it. So my PCC accuracy test is very scientific. I call it the minute of bad guy test. I set up a Sage Dynamic target, which is printed on a piece of printer paper and represents the torso, mostly the lungs and heart. And I shoot at it from 100 yards away with 7 shots. So why 7? I don't know. That's just what I did the first time, and I've done it consistently since. If the majority hit the target, it's minute of bad guy accurate. At 100 yards, I can't really see the vitals. I can just see this white rectangle of printer paper. The front sight covers almost all of it, so I held it as center as possible and just let it fly. 6 of the 7 hit perfectly, all in the lungs and heart, and I had 1 miss. I know which my miss was. It was my 3rd shot, and I threw it, and I knew it as soon as I pulled the trigger that I threw the shot, so I was pretty irritated by that. But overall, I would say the H&R DOE SMG is surprisingly accurate. More accurate than I need it to be, but I won't complain. A big reason why people don't like blowback 9mm subguns is that the recoil is about the same as a 5.56 rifle. The muzzle rise is more controllable, admittedly, especially from a 7.5-inch barrel, but you're still getting 5.56 recoil with 9mm ballistics, which I understand why people don't like. It's not the most efficient gun. But with that in mind, the recoil is not exceptionally bad. Even a 5.56 rifle doesn't recoil that much. It's just worse than you expect. Now, if you were to misuse your brace and maybe like place it against a part of your body, like say your shoulder, you will experience a bit of discomfort. This is called a blade style brace for a reason, and it's a very apt description. If you were to like put it against your shoulder and fire 300 rounds in a day, you might feel kind of bruised a little later that night. So with that in mind, I wanted to try to see what this gun would have been like if I worked for the DOE Protective Force, and it turns out it's actually really easy to find the Department of Energy Protective Force qualifications. I found a 1997 version in a PDF format that had the submachine gun qual. It doesn't talk about this specific submachine gun, it's just submachine guns in general. If you go to the more modern one, the 2021, that has been removed, so keep an eye out for the 1997 one if you want to shoot it. So the DOE submachine gun qual has 9 stages that start at 3 yards and you go all the way out to 50. Each drill has accuracy and time standards, and I absolutely smoked it shooting the H&R DOE submachine gun. The times are fairly generous, like most police officer style quals. This is a very, very easy qual to pass, but I still enjoyed shooting it in like a third of the time necessary. I don't want to get too deep into it, so I'll post a separate video detailing the qual if you guys are interested, but ultimately you do some double taps, some failure to stop drill, and reloads. It does have some burst fire sections, which you really can't do, so I just tried to replace it with double taps. Now, the point of shooting the qual for me and for this review was just to see how the gun handled it close range and close quarters combat style shooting. So there's a couple things I want to note. I really like Colt submachine gun magazines. They are heavy and they fall out of the gun as soon as you hit the button, which make reloads pretty fast. I had to practice my reloads, but I got really fast when I realized you just grab that submachine gun magazine like you're going to beat someone with it and just shove it in the gun. Because they're straight, they slide in really easy, and they actually slide in easy on a close bolt as well if you're doing like a tactical style reload. Colt submachine gun mags also have a last round bolt hold opened, and your traditional AR controls make reloads always very quick, and that's the case here. It's very easy to handle. Even though the gun has the recoil of a 5.56 rifle, it doesn't have the muzzle rise. So when you're shooting those longer strings, those quick 2-round bursts, if you will, the gun's not moving a whole lot upward, it's just kind of moving backward into your shoulder. So if you brace it correctly, you can shoot very quickly without the gun coming off target. Now, I supplemented my shooting with various drills, including a bill drill, which I scored in my best was like 1.49, which is 6 rounds into an IPSC-sized A zone at 7 yards, fast as possible, starting in the low ready. It's a lot of fun to shoot, and honestly, if you watch the video, you can see how many brass casings are still in the air between the first and 6th shot, showing how easy this gun is to shoot quickly and accurately. The only thing that'll slow you down with this gun is the micro-sized peep sight. I mean, this thing's begging for like a gooseneck mount or maybe just a carry handle style red dot mount, and I think that would make it a lot faster shooting. So I might do that, but I might keep it original because I do really like the sleek look of the DOE submachine gun. I mean, if possible, I might just see if I can slip an A2 style sight in the rear, just the apertures, and use the wider, I think they called it the night peep sight or something like that. I think that would be a much better option, even if it would be less clone correct. The whole point of the original Colt Department of Energy submachine gun was to have a micro-sized submachine gun. The 7.5-inch barrel makes this thing really short and really easy to handle, which is kind of fun. I tried getting in and out of a car with it, especially my 6'5" ass and a tiny Honda, and I could do it with ease. If I had to bail out of a car and fight, I kind of would like to take something this sized. It's also really easy to maneuver indoors. I look like an absolute goof going through my house, pretending to be a protective service agent, fighting the Russians who have invaded my nuclear power plant. But it is really easy to work around corners. I kind of see why those tactical teams liked 9mm submachine guns for so long. They're just super easy to use indoors and in tight quarters. Now, with all that said, a lot of people aren't going to be using this for any kind of serious role, and that's perfectly fine because it is a very fun gun to shoot. I enjoyed every round I fired. I enjoyed hearing the boing of the spring and the receiver extension. I enjoyed the recoil. I enjoyed the Colt submachine gun magazines. Hell, it even smells like a retro rifle somehow. It smells like my M16A2 from boot camp. H&R and the crew at PSA, all those guys just did a fantastic job of replicating a gun I've wanted for 20 years. So needless to say, I'm biased. If you need a gun for self-defense, I probably wouldn't pick this one. There's plenty of other 9mm style rifles with more modern features that would be a better option. But if you're looking for like a really fun retro gun, this is the way to go. So I've been really been thinking about is going to a local steel challenge match and seeing if they'll let me shoot this thing. I do plan to purchase it from PSA and immediately SBR it and get rid of that blade style brace for a Car 15 style stock. And I might add a red dot to the top of it in like an easy to remove way. and just see if I can get some eye turning going at a steel challenge match. I feel like I could clean up pretty well with this gun. Speaking of fun, what's not fun is an unreliable gun, but that wasn't an issue here. One of the big benefits of blowback designs is that they're kind of hard to mess up. You'd have to really try to make an unreliable direct blowback gun. So this weapon is super reliable and it's not ammo picky. I did fire mostly 115 grain steel cased full metal jackets, but I tossed like a handful of Winchester 115 grain JHPs in there and they fed without a problem. And I shot some 147 grain subsonic stuff. I don't have a suppressor on it yet, but I do plan to suppress it. I think that would be a lot of fun too. So it handles subsonic ammo fine, handles cheap steel case fine, seems to handle JHPs without a problem, but keep in mind I fired less than 20 of those through the gun. So if you're going to use this gun for self-defense, you better fire a lot more than 20 to make sure they work. Now, ultimately, I think H&R did a fantastic job and delivered us a mostly faithful reproduction of the original Department of Energy submachine gun. It scratched a 20-year itch for me and finally given me a gun that I've wanted since I was a kid. Now, this is not a cheap gun. It's actually kind of expensive for a blowback 9mm, but it's cheap as far as DOE SMG clones go. I imagine it took a lot of fabrication to make this gun. You know, this isn't something you could just slap together with off-the-shelf parts. I wouldn't even know where to start if I was producing this thing, but they did a fantastic job, and it's actually affordable enough that if you're like me and you've wanted one forever, you can own one without going into debt. Now, if you're looking for something for self-defense or duty use, I would probably pick a more modern design, but this thing is a lot of fun to shoot, and that's where it really shines. It's a fun gun. I think it'll be a lot of fun at Steel Challenge once the SBR stamp comes back, and if that goes well, I might film it and upload it here. But I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for liking the video. All that fun stuff. I really enjoy it. And let me know what you guys think of the DOE submachine gun below. Does anyone here have any experience? Does anyone know why the sight folds for sure? And does anyone know how the Department of Energy actually used these guns? Because it's not well documented. Well, with that in mind, thank you again. Have a great day.